Hello again and welcome to our round 2 preview on Try Hard NRL Betting Podcast.
Lego.
Lego.
Hey, right on. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. La, 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 la. This is how we do it.
Nice intro. And, well, we're back again for round 2, and what a way to kick off the first pod, going a perfect 2-0 of our best bets.
Yeah, you can't ask for much more than perfection. It's been a good week, hasn't it?
You really can't. It has been a really good week. And obviously, making the money for our loyal listeners.
Yeah, that's right. We kicked off the weekend the right way with the Knights. They really had me worried there. You know, they were getting killed in the penalty count, 10-5 down, 8 points down, a man in the sin bin.
Yep.
But they came through strong for us, cashed our first bet of the season.
Yeah, and they had us sweating for a little bit there, but it ended up covering easily. And the second bet that we had, obviously, was the Titans, which everyone had written off in round 1. We got plus 6.5 points, and they lost by 1, but obviously covered the spread fairly handily. Now, they put in a really good effort. They tried really hard. They didn't have too much to work with either, but they just couldn't quite close it in the end.
Sounds like the story of my life, really. In fact, you'd have to say that was the closest game of the round, but if you did take our advice, like you say, if you took 6.5, then you were pretty comfortable in the final minutes with the score tied.
Well, that's exactly right, because with the scores tied, obviously, even a converted try couldn't have lost it for you, so that's the importance of, taking the value and taking the points where you can get them.
Exactly. Now, where do we even start with this fan mail? Like, we're not going to go through as much as we did last week, but plenty of expressions of gratitude, general excitement from the listeners out there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There was heaps of people writing in, obviously, very excited about, the 2-0 start, which got a lot of them a bit of money. But the first fan is from Fizz in Briz, actually. This is on Instagram, and he posted, "Boom!
Boom!
New set of golf clubs, courtesy of the Try Hard NRL Betting Podcast." And then he hashtagged, "Pod don't lie."
And I actually got something in from Glenn in Whistler, and he wrote, "I'm going to have to wear my ski mask next time I listen to the pod, because this actually feels like stealing." Hashtag, pod don't lie.
Pod don't lie.
I think that was actually trending on Twitter by the weekend. So that's pretty incredible. We don't even have a Twitter account
No, we
yet.
don't, do we?
But anyway, back to business. Back to the grindstone. We're not going to get complacent.
No.
We work hard every week to give you guys the best plays.
There's people
to make money.
There's people counting on us now and holding us accountable, so we need to put in the hours of research and give them what we want.
And so let's talk a little bit about round 1 in a segment we call the 3 biggest takeaways.
Yep.
What did you take away from round 1 that you can use to earn money in the future?
Oh, look, there were certainly a few things, and I think, first of all, as we predicted, the Bronx and the Sharks are going to need a little bit more time to gel than most people thought. Obviously, they had a few good pickups in the off-season, but really, and when this happens, a lot of people want to jump ship really early, but they are going to need a bit more time to gel, and we're probably going to find out a lot more about these two teams when they meet this week.
Yeah, my first takeaway is also about the Broncos, specifically Milford. Did I go a little overboard? He might not be as good as advertised, especially in the 5/8 position. He's got a lot of ability, like we said, new teammates, new system, but I'm not going to be rushing to bet the Broncos early in the season.
Yeah, no, and that's fair enough, and that was in our best pickups of the off-season segment, and my biggest takeaway is there's someone in that segment that we probably skipped over, and that's Glenn Stewart. Absolutely great pickup for the Rabbitohs, absolute workhorse, and he looks like he's going to be a great fit there.
Did you see the size of his pecs?
He is massive.
They don't lose too much losing Sam Burgess when you pick up a guy like Stewart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you there.
And I think, really, the Roosters and the Rabbits, I think they're going to be just as good as they were last year.
Yeah, they are as good as advertised. Now, speaking of Glenn Stewart, a team that's really missing him is Manly. Now, who could have seen this coming?
Well,
the reason people came out to us and said, you guys, you said Manly's going to have a terrible year, so why didn't you bet against Manly Friday night? And my only concern was you still had that core with Cherry Evans and Four, and I just thought there'll be effort, first week, they'll show up, they'll want to, make a point, put a stop to the headlines, but it was anything but. The attack wasn't too bad, but the defence was absolutely putrid. I mean, people can say the Eels played well, but go back and look at some of those Eels tries, they're just so easy. It's bloody kindy out there.
Radradra was just strolling through for his triple.
Bloody walk in the park for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got any more takeaways from round 1?
Probably just one. Now, obviously, the best bet that we had on the Titans, that one cashed. They were dogs, and they just lost there in the end. But I think once they get Greg Bird back, once they get Dave Taylor back, they're going to not be too bad. And look, the public perception's still going to be pretty down on them, so you're going to find some value going, betting on them, in the first half of the season. Once they get those two guys back, we might look to bet on them a little bit.
I absolutely agree. And another team I'm going to keep looking to bet on is the Knights. That back line is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Any time that you've got a former Australian and New South Wales captain, Origin player Kurt Gidley, getting scratched 5 minutes before kickoff, and you can put a guy in fullback who played for the Kangaroos last October, you've got a pretty good back line.
Yeah, and he'll be back this week.
Now, next we're going to do a quick betting 101. We're going to talk about professional play, but first, it's time for probably everyone's favourite segment.
Absolutely. I think it's probably one of the favourite segments of the show. Let's hear from him.
Need to kickstart your own preseason training? The Try Hard NRL Betting Podcast is proudly sponsored by Sanity, the Performance Athletic Association specialising in functional and sports-specific training. Find and follow Sanity on Instagram today.
Loyal sponsor Sanity, and a big shout out goes to him. Obviously, with his personal training, and also, he's selling some fitness apparel now, which is really high quality stuff, I've heard.
Yep, cheers for the foosball table, which we have in our rec room here at the studio.
Yep, first gift to the pod, and first of many more to come, I would assume.
Let's hope so. Now, one of the questions that I got asked a lot, including by Evan, was, come on, you guys killed it last week, so what's with only giving out 2 picks? Why didn't you guys pick every game? Yeah,
well, that's exactly right, and I got asked the same thing as well, and look, I guess the simple answer is that there's only value in some of the games that we see. I mean, we do the research a lot, and, the bookies set the lines where they may, but look, the thing is, sometimes they do actually get the lines right, and our job, and your job as bettors, in order to, at least make some money, is to find where those lines are slightly wrong and then capitalise on that. But not every game's wrong, is it?
No, that's exactly right, and we will, in any game, try and tell you the side we prefer. So we might say we really like a certain side in this game, or, gun to our head, we're going to pick this side, but it doesn't mean we're going to put our money on it unless we see enough of an advantage there. I mean, you can pick every game, but as you said, usually, it's a billion-dollar industry betting. They don't put, bad lines out there on purpose.
Yep.
They don't get it wrong too often. So, they have that inherent advantage, and unless you can pick your spots, you're not going to make as much money, and that's what we're going to try and teach you.
Yeah, well, that's right, and, by picking every game, that's the sort of one advantage that you're taking away from yourself. Obviously, as we explained last week, the bookie's got the advantage of taking 10 cents off the dollar off you for any winning bet, but the advantage that you have is being able to pick what games you want to play and what you want to bet on. So
yeah, I'm 100% confident if we picked every game, we'd pick more winners than we'd pick losers, but it wouldn't be as high of a winning percentage as what we're going to be giving out this season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just on a side note, I know we went 2-0, but a little bit about that. Look, you can't go perfect all the time. Look, obviously the lines are set. Professionals set these lines. And look, there's professional gamblers out there, right? And what sort of percentage do they need to have to be making money?
I mean, you can make really good money if you can hit 55%.
55%.
If you can win 55% of your bets.
Right, so that's if you bet 20 times, you're winning 11 of those.
That's right. That's what you need to be doing.
So if you can get that sort of ratio going, then you're making money. So you can't expect, as a bettor, you have a few losses here and there, but you can't expect to be winning every single line bet. If you're making 11 from 20, 55%, you're doing well.
That's right. And without any further abotha, let's preview round 2. And the first game of the round is Doggies hosting the Eels.
Doggies hosting the Eels. Now, the line for this one has changed a little bit since it first came out. Now, obviously, that's due to Josh Reynolds being out for a number of weeks. But the line we've got now, Canterbury laying 4 points, Parramatta the dog.
And if you like Canterbury, you can also get 3.5.
Yep.
So you'll win if they win by 4. Oh, geez, I'm so close to making the Dogs the best bet. And here's my reasoning. The Dogs had to play in Penrith last week. That's just about the toughest place you can go to play. I've said, on the pod before that I think Penrith's legit.
Yep.
So I'm not taking anything away from the Dogs. They started terribly. They came back and really had the Penrith sweating. They were on their try line down 6 after being down, I think it was 22-0, 24-0.
They were down 24-0,
yeah.
And with 15 minutes to go. And in that 10-minute stretch, they piled on 3 tries. They were absolutely rolling. They had back-to-back sets of 6 on Penrith's line in the last couple of minutes. Just couldn't quite capitalise. But they're still a really good team.
They absolutely are. That forward pack is still legit.
Yeah.
And compare that to the Eels. Now, we have a team that looks really good, but as I touched on earlier, were they really that good, or would anybody have beat Manly by 20 on that night? Because Manly were absolutely putrid. So we've got a team that looks a lot better than they are, and a team that doesn't look quite as good as they are. It should be an automatic play, but here's what's holding me back. We've got Reynolds out. We've got Ennis moving clubs, so you've got a new hooker. You've got Brett Morris in there, so it's a new fullback. That's, no contingency in the spine there. And they're backing up from a really physical game on a Sunday afternoon to play Friday, whereas Eels get that full week. And I'm not going to take too much away from the Eels. They did aim up in defence. They played good physical footy, so I expect them to show up. And I just don't want to lay 3.5 points with the Dogs. Yeah,
and look, we had a chat about this earlier in the week, and the line was a little bit higher than it was, and it's dropped now. But look, we don't think Para's the real deal after a win like that. Obviously, a lot of money's come on Para from the public, but in saying that, and you're right, a little bit of a short turnaround here, and that matters when you've gone into round 1. Tough physical game. It's the first one you've played of the season. It's a stay away from me. Now, moving on to the second game, we've got Cronulla hosting the Broncos, and that's a pick'em game. Do you want to explain what pick'em is? We're going to use that term fairly often.
Yep, so when we say pick'em, it means the line is 0, so there is no plus or minus points, so we call it pick'em because all you got to do is pick the team that's going to win.
Yeah.
And I'm really not going to say too much about this game because we've spoken about the Broncos a few times already. I'll just say that we're going to know a lot more about both these teams after 80 minutes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think we're going to see what teams are starting to gel a little bit quicker than the other. But look, when you've got two teams that are still, they've got new players on them, obviously still trying to gel their team together, it's tough to sort of pick who's going to gel first.
And we essentially do agree with the bookies that it pretty much is a 50-50 game.
Oh, I agree, yeah. I think they've set the line correctly here. And for that reason, we don't see any line value. We're going to stay away from that game as well. Now, the third one off the list, we've got Penrith hosting the Gold Coast Titans. And Penrith actually laying a couple of converted tries here. You've got to lay 12 points if you want to bet them. And look, Penrith were clinical in the first half last week. They showed why we thought they were going to be probably a top four team. You picked them to win the whole thing this year.
Yep.
The Titans showed some heart, but the thing is, that was the first game. That was probably a lot of emotion going through them. Very motivated for that first game. Could get a bit of a letdown spot this week, but look, Penrith are clinical. But the thing is, laying 2 converted tries is just too many points for me to lay, even with a clinical Penrith team.
Yep. So as you say, the line is 12. And geez, brutal loss for the Gold Coast because we know they're not going to win many games this year. And they got the score to 18 all. They had probably 4 opportunities inside the opposition's 20 where they dropped the ball at dummy half. They dropped the ball in the tackle. They had a field goal charge down where he took an ice age to have a shot.
Yeah, it was so long.
And then they gave the Tigers half a chance and they slotted a 45-minute field goal. That's got to hurt.
Yeah, that was one of the worst drop goal conversion attempts that I've ever seen in my life. We were watching it actually, and look, the dummy half took an age to throw it, and then obviously took an age to line up for the kick.
Big looping pass as well.
Big looping pass, and then, just no urgency there whatsoever, and that was for the game.
But the point I'm trying to make is that, that lingers in your mind when you're not a good team. You let that one slip. Now you're going down to Penrith. That's a tough road trip, and they find themselves down early.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But I'm not going to lay 12 points with Penrith this early in the season just because the Titans still are showing me enough fight and showing me enough that I'm going to have to leave this game alone too.
Yeah, I agree, and there's still a little bit of motivation for them at the start of the season, but look, maybe once we get to the back end of the season and they're, cellar dwellers, there might be a little less motivation then. But for now, that's also a stay away from us. We don't see any value there. Now moving on to Manly hosting Melbourne. Manly plus 2.5. Now, look, the line earlier in the week was pick'em. And then Manly obviously got absolutely trounced by Para. Melbourne had a decent showing against St George, better than we thought anyway.
Yep.
And the line shifted 2.5 points. I think we spoke a little bit earlier about this, and look, if we had to play a side, we'd probably lean towards Melbourne. But, you're laying 2.5 points now. They have to win by 4 basically for you to cash your bet, and a little bit of the value's gone there.
And, we still have to respect Manly at Brookvale. And one way you won't get rich betting the NRL is betting against a team that got smashed the previous week. These guys are professionals. Manly's a successful team that came second last year. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there's still that chance that they really bounce back and they really have a point to prove. They've lost foreign, which is one of the reasons I'm not betting on Manly in this game, that's for sure.
Yep.
And there's also, obviously the news that Cherry Evans is
Well,
out of
that's
there.
right. I mean,
and he must really want to leave if he's going to the Gold Coast.
yeah, well, that's right. And I mean, really, is there that much for the team to play for, obviously, when your 2 best players are leaving next season?
There's talk the coach could be out as well.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. There's a lot of off-field drama, and sometimes, well, a lot of the time that does translate to on-field. So if we had to play a side, we'd probably play Melbourne, but, laying 2.5 points now when earlier in the week you could have got Pickham, it's a stay away from me.
Yep, I agree with that. Now let's move on to another one of the most favourite segments of the show, which is the rapid fire, or as we sometimes call it, 6 to go. And do you want to kick it off?
We've got a few questions in here sent in. Now the first one comes from Jared, all the way down in Wollongong. Thanks, Jared, for listening. Now he says, guys, it was actually scary how well you predicted what would happen in round 1. No, he's absolutely right there. Did anything shock you?
Did anything shock me? Gavin Badger's haircut? Now I got a question from Pete in Kedron, and he's written, "Hi guys, whilst I'm a long-time listener, I haven't put any money into your tips yet."
It's so silly.
Yeah. What are you doing, Pete? You should know better than anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Free money. But I must admit that I'm impressed with your 100% win record.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, but we'll do what we can to keep it rolling. I recently had a series of losses betting on the English cricket team, and I need to make my money back fast. Something about 3 to 1, $3 odds, should cover my losses. Any tips?
Well, first of all, should we give him some commiserations for being an English supporter while the World Cup's going on?
I mean, the bat was in by about a metre, but, rules of rule, Macca.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah. And they're on the plane back home now, and that was a dismal showing by them. But, look, Pete, appreciate the feedback, appreciate the question. Now, in terms of 3 to 1 odds for this week, look, I've had a quick look through the round, and really the only one that's around 3 to 1 is the Newcastle Knights playing North Queensland. Now, look, Newcastle's a solid team. They're better than we think. They're better than I think everyone thinks they are. But North Queensland at home, coming off a big loss, they are going to be fired up. So I cannot suggest that you play on Newcastle. Look through the rest of the I've looked through the rest of the games this week. I don't see any value for you there, Pete, honestly, on an underdog. So what I would suggest is to just listen to our best bet and perhaps throw double what you're going to on instead, and that should make up the losses for you.
Yeah, sorry, Pete. Can't magically give you a 3 to 1 dog, but our advice as professionals is, if you get down a little bit, don't go chasing. You don't need the home run. Just believe in the pod, trust the pod. We've got a best bet coming up. Get on board with that. You feel a little risk averse, maybe put a little extra on that, as Alex says.
Yep.
And then just follow it through.
Yeah, because when you're struggling, when you're down in the dumps, obviously, when your team's just been kicked out of the World Cup, you want to go crazy and bet on these high odds and maybe get some lucky winners. But in all reality, that's just gonna make you go further and further into a hole, and then soon enough you'll be on the streets.
And I mean, we've made history there with the longest answer to a rapid fire question
Yeah,
in the pod. But
Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing. If we see any good underdogs that we think can win at decent odds, we'll tell you.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
we're not gonna give it out just for the sake of it. We're only giving things we will bet our own money on as well.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So the next question we've got comes from all the way over in the States, Evan in Sacramento. I'm glad that we've got some overseas listeners over here.
I've had people hitting me up from France.
Yeah, France has been hitting us up, and obviously Evan was a loyal listener back when we did the NBA podcast and all the American sports, the NFL, that sort of thing. Now Evan says, "Hi guys, love the show. Just wanted to know your thoughts on the Broncos' chances after a dismal showing in round 1 versus South Sydney. Do Milford and Blair fill the void that Barber and Hannon have left, or is Brisbane even further off the pace this year? Cheers."
I mean, do they fill the void? I mean, this was a team that was a mid-table team last year that, snuck into the 8 through the back door. And are they much better this year? Maybe not. We've spoken ad nausea about the Broncos. And sorry, we do, have more Brisbane listeners, and that's going to happen. We're going to get a few more Brisbane questions. But I'm going to say we're just going to have to wait and see, Evan. But if you're looking to bet the Bronx, maybe just hold out a few more weeks. I'm telling you, they're probably going to have a bit more improvement in them.
Yeah.
It won't be as bad as last week, but the improvement won't happen overnight either.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I think they'll probably come good after a few weeks, but we will have to, we'll have to wait and see. But I'd suggest that if you get the time, definitely sit down and watch that Broncos v Sharks matchup this weekend. I think you're going to have a lot of takeaways from there, and that'll show what team's well on their way and what's maybe needs a bit more time to gel.
Now I've got Willie in Sydney, and Willie's wrote, the Broncos signed like 6 fullbacks. And yet somehow we still end up with Kahu at number 1. And then he's written in capitals, how is this possible?
Anything's possible. Anything's possible!
Yep, well, should we move on to the last half of the round?
And that's the Cowboys hosting the Knights.
Yep, and we've talked a little bit about this one now, but obviously North Queensland coming off a brutal loss, Newcastle coming off an impressive win, and the thing is here, usually, usually you'd think, you'd take North Queensland in this spot. Obviously, coming off a dismal showing, they'll be wanting to get back on that horse, and obviously public perception is going to be off them a little bit. But they are laying 7.5 points, and that's probably a little bit too much for me to take, to be honest. Even though I think that the Cowboys, will put up a good showing here.
Get back on that horse. Was that on purpose?
Yep.
Or, that was nice. I like that.
Yep.
And that's exactly right. They lost once in Townsville all of last season. They've already lost once this season. We don't want to go against them. They're going to be smarting, and Thurston doesn't lose back-to-back home games.
Yep.
But as I said earlier, Newcastle's an underrated side. That's quite a lot of points, 7.5 points. It's a hell of a backline, and the forward pack does aim up. They're quite a mobile team. Should be a really good game. If I had to lean away, I'm leaning Newcastle just with those points.
Yep,
but
I
as
agree.
I said, North Queensland, they didn't look too good last week, but 2 points I want to make about their game against the Roosters. 1, the Roosters are actually awesome.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
2, the Cowboys must have dropped about 3 tries over the line.
Yep.
It could have actually been a little bit closer. So I want to wait and see what happens in this game. If North Queensland does bounce back, as I suspect they will, then I'm going to look to play on Newcastle again in coming rounds.
No, that's absolutely right. So, in summary, another stay-away game from us. We just don't see too much line value here. And now the big one. The Rabbitohs hosting the Roosters. Now, actually, earlier in the week, or a week ago at Look Ahead Lines, this was Pick'em, but South Sydney's moved into slight favouritism. You have to lay 1.5 if you want to bet them. Look, this is just going to be a fantastic game. Arguably the 2 best teams in the comp going head-to-head. Look, the Roosters were impressive last week, but Souths were just as impressive. And look, to me, if I had to lean aside, I would grab the points with the Roosters, because I really do believe this is a true coin flip game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And another way you're not going to get rich betting the NRL is taking a team that looked awesome last week and had a dominating win. But in this case, they both did.
Yep.
So they both look really good in the public's eyes, and it's with good reason. They are both really good. I'm with you. You know this game's going to be tight. You can talk about revenge factor for the Roosters, but the fact is, South Sydney's not going to be coming any less hard. These 2 teams hate each other.
Yep.
They always play awesome games. The line is only 1.5. I almost want to take the Roosters as well. If you ask me in a vacuum, I think the Roosters are just slightly the better side.
Yep.
That back line is just unreal. But I'm just not quite going to play it because I'm not getting quite enough points. And South Sydney coming off a Thursday game, so 9 days to
Extra
prepare for
days
this
rest.
one. And it's going to be a physical one.
Yeah, I agree. And should we just quickly explain why we don't like to take teams coming off a massive win? And the main reason for that is if a team's coming off a massive win, especially in round 1 where everyone's been watching, all the public wants to bet on them. And when that happens, the price gets driven down and you just automatically, inbuilt into the line, you get less value because every Joe Schmo is on that team.
Yep, and exactly the opposite effect for teams that get smashed. So you'll
Yep.
definitely notice that we're going to go for the ugly duckling. We're going to go for the teams that looked bad the week before, and we're going to want to go against the teams that look good. And basically the philosophy is no team is as bad as their worst game, but no team is as good as their best game either.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why one of our main principles, and obviously we don't blindly bet this, but if we have a team coming off a really terrible loss and a team versus a team coming off a really, really impressive win, we'll often look to bet the team that's coming off the bad loss.
And that leads pretty well into the next game of the round, which is the Raiders.
Absolutely. The Raiders hosting the Warriors. Now, there's the line is floating in between +1.5 and +2 for Canberra. They're slight home dogs. Obviously, off the win, last week. I think if they lost this is exactly what we were talking about a little bit earlier. New Zealand coming off a loss there. Not necessarily a bad loss, but I think the Knights are an underrated team. So a loss to them looks a little bit worse. And the Sharkies, people think they're better than they are at the start of the season. They're going to need a bit of time to gel. So, people saw Canberra beat the Sharkies and they think that's a really good win. I love New Zealand in this spot. What about you?
Yeah, New Zealand's got to be pretty dirty at themselves. That game was there for the taking, and there's a moment in that game where when they were had a 13-on-12 advantage, they put the forward through the hole, he dropped the ball. If he puts them up 14, they go a long way towards winning that game.
Absolutely.
There's a stat that they haven't won a round one game outside of Auckland since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start the season too well. They don't want to start 0-2. And let's not overreact to the Canberra win from last week. It's still not a very talented team. And the reason why I'm going to call New Zealand my best bet of the round is because Sam Tompkins is back. He was a late scratching last week. That guy's a gun. Makes a huge difference to that attack. Just an extra weapon for Johnson, who was really quiet last week. And Johnson won Golden Boot last year. I really expect him to bounce back. I think it's going to be a pretty tight game, but New Zealand's got the class with guys like Tompkins and Johnson. They're gonna find a way to win this game. For me, it's the best bet.
Yeah, and I'm going to side with you, and I'll make that a best bet as well. Look, I watched that Canberra game, if not in a pub, so I was, a little bit busy. But I did watch the last, 20 or 30 minutes. And the Sharks had all the ball. They were absolutely dominating the Raiders. And the Raiders got a couple of lucky tries in that second half. The Sharks were the better team on the night. I think that was a lucky win from Canberra. People are overreacting. They're thinking Canberra might be, a lot better than they're going to be this year. But I think they'll still finish bottom two. New Zealand's got a solid team. I picked them to make the 8, and I think this is a spot where they'll bounce back off a bad loss, and I'm happy to make New Zealand a best bet.
Yep, and as you said, different sites have the line somewhere between 1.5 and 2.
Yep.
If you like New Zealand, obviously you only want to lay 1.5, so
That's
that if the score lands on 2, you win.
They just have to win by conversion.
Yep.
Now we've got the Tigers, our good friend Pete and Kedron's team. The Tigers hosting St George.
The final game of the round, and here's another case where one team off a win, the other side off a loss.
Yep.
Is there a little bit of extra motivation for the side that come off the loss?
Probably.
And I almost want to make St George a best bet here too, but St George's best player is Josh Dugan. I'm not betting on St George when I watched Dugan carried from the field last Monday night.
Yeah, is he just the most injury-prone player in the NRL?
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, we were watching it last week, and I know you didn't get to watch it, but I was texting you the updates, and I said, Dugan injured, hobbling off. He came back on, got injured again, got stretchered off. Obviously, St George's best player. Look, the Tigers, they've got a young team. They're not that good. People are overreacting. Yes, they're at home. Look, you have to lay 4 points if you want to go with the Tigers. I don't think, coming off a big win, the Tigers aren't as good as people think. And look, St George is the only side that I could look at here, but without their best player, it's a stay away from me. Yeah,
if Dugan was in, this would probably be the best bet, but without Dugan, just not enough strike. We have to remember the Dragons don't have Morris anymore either.
Yep.
The Tigers are solid. The Tigers showed me a little bit. They showed me they don't have a lot of talent, but they do fight. Farah's still a good leader, and I agree, that's a stay away. So just the one best bet this week. We touched on earlier in the show that we don't try and reach. We just play the bets that we're actually going to put our own money on.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I
Warriors.
mean, look, there may be weeks where we have no best bets, and there may be weeks where we have 5. It all just sort of depends on what's going on, on the spots for various teams. But this week we've just got the one, and we're taking the New Zealand Warriors -1.5 points as a best bet.
And that should do it. So, best of luck to everyone.
Yep. And
Happy punting.
yeah, happy punting, and that should wrap it up for today. And as always, remember, please
Please, gamble responsibly.